Thanks for having me. My name is Janssen Bradshaw. I have run a blog called Everyday Reading since 2006. So it is a grandma in blog years for sure. I have a master's in library and information studies, and I was an elementary school librarian in Massachusetts before my girls were born. Now I have four girls who are ages 3 to 10, and I stay home with them and then also probably work about 30 hours a week running my blog, Everyday Reading, and some other businesses. So definitely stay very busy.
Definitely. Let me double check something here.
Okay.
That looks like it was not recording, so I'm just going to double check. That would
No worries. I can start over. Other businesses that I run, and most of all, I just really, really love to read.
Which is excellent. You're in good company. So congrats on the successful launch of Savvy Readers. I just have been looking into that a little bit. Will you talk to us about the program a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a little background, my first daughter learned to read very easily and very early. And, people would say, oh, what did you do? I'm like, this was just really how she came. She was just ready to read on her own. I can't take any credit for it. Our second daughter really struggled to learn how to read. We worked with her for several years. And then last year when she was in first grade, her teacher said, she is struggling. I think that we need a little extra help here. And so the aide in that classroom started pulling her out every day. And then when school shut down, she would do online tutoring 4 mornings a week with her, which went all the way through the rest of the school year. And then we asked her to stay on through the summer and keep doing it with her, just to keep that consistency going. And like many children, she responds better to an adult that is not her parent. She'll push back more if we ask her to do things that are hard than if a different adult does that. So it was really a great experience for her, and she made so much progress. And it was just such a weight off my shoulders to know that she was getting in the practice she needed. Anyway, all of that is a long story to say that was kind of the inspiration behind Savvy Reading. So we know that there's lots of kids out there who, the parents just don't have either the time or, the personality or the know-how to help their kids learn to read, but their kids need that extra practice. So Savvy Reading is a 4-day-a-week, Monday through Thursday, about 25-minute class, either individual or small group, 4 kids or less, to practice reading skills for kids K through 2nd grade reading level. So, we have older kids, 7, 8, 9, who are doing, reading on a 1st or 2nd grade level, who are in some of those groups as well. And also, younger kids like 4-year-olds who are already starting to get ready to read and are on a kindergarten level. So anyway, we've just launched that this fall, and it's been really exciting and fun.
That is amazing. And that program is just going to be incredible. I've looked into it a little bit. I don't have any readers yet. My oldest will be 4 in December. He loves being read to. He does some sight words, but nothing too crazy. So, and I'm not pushing anything, but I've been kind of looking at Savvy Readers, trying to get an idea, because what will be tricky for him is because he's a December baby, he will not start school next year, but he will start school and almost be 6. And I know that happens with a lot of kiddos, just depends on where you live and, the cutoff date. But that's really good to know, because I just, even though I taught school for 5 years, I still feel like, and though I've tutored, I still feel like there are some things with starting to read that I'm not as comfortable with teaching, because I taught upper grades. I taught 4th grade. That was my grade for 5 years. So I had student taught in 2nd and 5th and hopped around a little there, but I taught 4th grade for 5 years, which is it's not that common. So it was neat that I got to, because we did a lot of novel study. So I'm really good at all of that, upper grade, even easy chapter type reading, but not starting to read. So that's good to know. So my other question is, I was looking at it today because you said the launch was so successful that you're going to need more workers, that you're going to need more people to apply. So tell us a little bit about what's required for someone to apply. Could someone that was a school teacher but whose teaching license literally just expired, like in June this year, or do they need to be currently teaching, tutoring? What kind of things are you looking for?
So we are looking for either former or current teachers. and have had a license at some point. It doesn't have to be currently active. We're really looking for people who've had classroom experience, especially if you're in those group settings, that you know how to manage multiple kids and kind of, everyone getting the attention that they need. Obviously, if you're doing individual coaching, that's not so much of a big deal.
Right.
We've had so many amazing coaches already, and I'm thrilled that we need more, ones that have a lot of experience teaching kids to read, some at that really early level, kindergarten, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, others who have worked more extensively with struggling readers, lots with dyslexia training. So it's been really fun. And I'm really thrilled about all the different backgrounds of educational experience that is coming into Savvy Reading.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot of people already lined up that have a lot they're bringing, with them.
Yes.
So important for just all those different. So some are individual one-on-one tutoring and some are small groups, right?
Yep.
Like 4 kids, 6 kids?
Four is the max that any group will have.
That's awesome. And I mean, I really applaud that mindset, because there are some kids that just learn better together than, one-on-one.
Absolutely.
But that's like perfect, because as a former teacher, I feel like with a classroom size of about 30 to 32, it just depended on where I was lucky to keep my guided reading groups to 6 to 8 kids. And that was, with really advanced, with like kind of 2 intermediate, and then my kids that really needed that push and needed that extra attention. And I tried to keep that group really small. But it was also challenging because I had my gifted and talented endorsement. So it's never supposed to happen this way, but I actually had kids in the gifted and talented group. And then I had kids who were being referred for pull-out resource and different things. So like, that's kind of hard, to balance with that. And I still don't think I did a very good job with it, but I at least gained a lot of, experience from trying to get everybody in the right group and leveling them and all of that. So does it run the entire school year? It
actually runs year round. So,
Perfect.
The school year is more learning new skills. And then in the summer, it's more solidifying those skills, getting ready to go up into that next grade. So yeah, it's a year round program.
Love it. That's so smart. It's genius. Just because I talked about the summer slide a couple of episodes ago. So that's key to have that consistency for those kiddos.
Yeah, and it's hard to do as a parent. I mean, I was so grateful all summer to know that no matter what else I was doing, she was getting that daily practice.
Right.
And it wasn't long, about 20 to 25 minutes, but just that consistency makes a huge difference.
Definitely. So my next kind of comment and question for you are, well, first of all, you are the complete guru of all things children's books. You really are. One of my favorite posts of yours that I was looking at just recently, but it's probably from a while ago, was 4 tips for working with reluctant readers, as well as your awesome Raising Readers email-based course. I feel like there were 5 or so that I got from that. What would you say to our listeners about working with reluctant readers and the power of reading aloud?
So I think the thing about reluctant readers, there's really 2 things going on. You have a love of books and stories on the one hand, and then you have the actual skill of learning to read, which is not easy. And it's really not easy for a lot of kids. I actually asked on Instagram a couple of months ago how many people either currently had or had a child that struggled with learning to read. And it was more than 70% of the thousands of people who responded. I mean, it's just so common because learning to read is not easy for most people. I mean, there are the occasional exceptions where it's just they pick it up really quickly and easily, but that is rare. And I don't think any of us who are big readers love to read because we just love sounding out words or phonics, just like get us out of bed in the morning,
No, definitely not.
Maybe a few, but I think most of us, we love to read because we love a great story. We love learning something new. We love, kind of being taken out of our regular dishes and laundry kind of life and like being in a fantasy world or, whatever it is that you like to read or historical fiction. And so, I think with a reluctant reader, while they're working on that difficult skill of actually learning the mechanics of reading, my biggest goal as a parent is always to make sure that they still love that. They still maintain that love of books and reading, even if they're not yet capable of doing it themselves. And I think it's really easy if you have a child that's struggling to read to want to make them practice all the time. And obviously, I think that practice is super important and vital for a child to learn to read. But you want to make sure they're also having really positive experiences with books and stories at the same time, that they can keep that foundational love while they're building that bridge of reading skills. So, that means still reading a lot of fun picture books, or reading aloud chapter books, or listening to audiobooks, so that they keep loving books and reading even when they're really hating that part of learning to read, which is hard.
That is definitely a huge challenge. And I even, so my two kids are 21 months apart, and my youngest, she protests loudly anytime I put on a podcast in the car. My son loves it. He is definitely, I would say he's like a visual audio learner. He loves both, but he actually has loved the Stories podcast you've recommended to me. And we'll talk a little bit more about podcasts in a minute, but he's also really enjoyed Circle Round. And those aren't too long, but my daughter will get about 5 minutes in and just be done. So it's hard because we're all in the car together. And I know as she gets older, it will probably get better, but I normally try to have Elephant and Piggy or something to hand to her so that she's busy and can look at what she likes, so that brother can get that experience. He's a really good listener, actually, which is a skill I wish I had really worked on earlier in my life. I feel like I'm still as an adult learning how to be a good listener, but I think that that's a big part of reading, is hearing and listening to the sounds, but not obsessing over them, and engaging in that love of reading, like you said, keeping that love however you need to do it, really. There's different ways and different means of encouraging it. And I didn't talk about it on this podcast, but my podcast previously, I found this company called Discover Talking Pen, and they let you record on these stickers, and it's a STEM book, and you record on the you record on the sticker, and then the kid puts the pen in the book, and it's like you reading it to them.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and I'm excited to try that out as a gift for my son for his birthday. It's probably going to take me until December to really do it, because we got an outer space one and it looks intense, just tons to read. But I just feel like there's so many things, so many resources available now for us to take advantage of. And again, savvy reading is really neat. Now that you've started that program, there's just so many resources for people to use. Okay. I have so many questions, but I wanted to kind of, group them together. And I had a question for you. Let's see. Yes. Oh, it's almost the next one. So I remember when you posted on Instagram about a study done of kids that listen to audiobooks, and the comprehension and retention rate was even better than I had expected with what you shared. Can you talk to us a little bit about your research with audiobooks, and also mention any children's podcasts you recommend we listen to with our kids?
Yeah, let me pull that up so I can keep those numbers in front of me. I mean, this isn't research that I have done, but there's some studies that I have read. Edit this long pause out here.
And that's why we have editing. Don't even worry about it.
I know someone wanted to record a podcast live, and I was like, I don't want to record a podcast live. Yeah. Okay. So this first research study was about, this was in the San Francisco Bay Area School District. They have an after-school program, which most schools have. And so for second and third graders, they had some of these students listen to audiobooks for 20 minutes for five days a week, for 10 weeks. Now, this was not following along with the book. This was no quizzes afterwards or during. I mean, it was just like, sit back with your headphones, listen for 20 minutes, go on your merry way. And after 10 weeks, those kids that had listened achieved 58% of the annual gain in reading achievement. So they did in 10 weeks what a normal kid would do in half a year worth, a little more than that. And then compared to the control group, they had 3 times the reading comprehension, 7 times the vocabulary, and 4 times the reading motivation. It just really is mind-boggling. And I think, like most things, as a parent, we want to make things more complicated and more difficult than it needs to be. And I think, audiobooks or podcasts, anything where your child is listening to a story, we don't need to make it really complicated. We don't need to have worksheets or comprehension checks or, I mean, they can ask you questions, but it really is as easy as just turning on a good story and letting them enjoy it. And actually, I've noticed this. My second daughter that struggled a lot with reading, she loves audiobooks and has listened to audiobooks every day since she was probably about 4, maybe 3.
Oh, wow.
And it's really interesting now as she's really becoming a fluent reader that she has an incredible ear for reading. Like if she reads a sentence and she says the wrong word, she will catch it every time because she knows she's so good at listening even to herself read that's not the right word. That doesn't make sense. Or I've missed something here, and she'll go back. I almost never have to correct her because she's so good at catching it. And she has fantastic, I can't think of the right word, like inflection. She reads with a lot of feeling, when someone's loud or quiet or angry. I mean, she does a lot of emotional reading, which is very impressive considering how much she's struggled as a reader. And I think that is entirely due to audiobooks because she's listened to so many good readers. She knows what good reading sounds like.
That's really cool to think about because I remember when I taught school in Utah, we had to do the Dibbles reading test with the kids. And as far as, self-correcting, I was always amazed because the kids that did self-correct did have that intonation and inflection and dialogue. They had it all down. And then the kids that had never heard these words before or were unfamiliar with them, they just stumbled over them. And it's a time test, so you're like feeling bad, but you're like, just do your best and then keep trying to read. So like you said, even with that study, the neat thing is those kids performed so well, even though they were not being assessed and that's the hardest thing for me. It was probably one of the biggest challenges as a teacher was at times I felt like, you know what? I know my kids get it. I don't want to test them one more time. We test and we overdo it. And then I talked about this earlier in this season too. I remember doing like the accelerated reader program in school. I've loved to read since I don't know whenever I learned, probably right before kindergarten. And anyway, I remember taking a test on Wuthering Heights and I had not quite finished it. And I probably was like in middle school at this time, but I was so nervous about finishing before I had to go take the test that I didn't enjoy it. So I went back and reread it like a few years later and actually got a completely different, had a different experience entirely because I wasn't reading it to be assessed.
Yes, absolutely.
I was reading it for pleasure. So that's crazy how that can really change. I'm glad that I went back and read it though, because I wanted to read a lot of the classics and I didn't want to have this bad feeling about it because of what had happened.
Yeah.
So, and I have noticed that on some of your posts, your girls are so good, it seems like, at listening to audiobooks or podcasts. And I know they're older than my kids, so I keep reminding myself, like, her youngest, I think your youngest is the same as my son, but.
Yeah, she's 3.5.
Okay. And so he's starting to really love listening. Like I remember a few months ago when you had mentioned the stories. No, that was just recently. But when you mentioned Circle Round and I started, gradually he really started really getting into it. And there was this other science podcast, Why or something like that he was always asking to listen to too. And it made me so happy because, again, like I said, I was not a good listener all growing up. That wasn't a skill that I really acquired, but it's huge for learning to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a skill. I mean, I think it's easy to think, I get a lot of messages from parents who are like, I didn't think my kid would even like it. And then I tried it and they've now been sitting around the kitchen table coloring, listening to Boxcar Children for 2 hours. And some kids are like that, where it's just like really, they just pick right up, and others just need some practice. I mean, you get better at basically everything the more you practice. And so if your kid the first couple times is kind of like, I can't really follow along, they'll get better.
Definitely. And that's a good thing to hear and to keep in mind as parents, as caretakers, educators, because we just need to be patient,
Yeah, absolutely. And every kid goes at their own pace and has their own interests.
Which, if you play to those interests, I feel like that too will really get you ahead. My son's obsessed with outer space. We've checked out every library book on outer space and rockets. And I actually did purchase requests the last 2 months because we're finding more books, you know, that he wants. And I'm like, if I really like him, then we'll buy him, you know, for his birthday. But I want to check him out first. So I love that I've been able to do that. But it's, some people are like, aren't you sick of reading about outer space and rockets all the time? And it's like, no, there's actually like a lot out there. And he will read other books, but I read what he wants first. And then he's more open to, I've actually had, let me see if I can grab it. One of your lists, let's see which one it is. So I've been checking it off as we go.
Oh, is this the 100 picture books list?
Yeah, the 100 picture books, yep. And I've been checking it off as we go, and my library's had most of them. Actually, we just got Life Size Zoo, and that is so fun.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it's so cool. And they have both loved it. Like, I don't feel like there's been any book on this list that they haven't enjoyed or asked for again. So that's awesome that you provide.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you.
And while I'm mentioning that, I will ask you, when you make posts about children's books, what resources or websites do you like to use the most? I can always tell you do very thorough research. I've really only had experience with Hornbook a little bit, but I was wondering what you like to use the most and how that fuels your lists.
So, you know, I actually have a post that I'll send you the link to, and you can include it in the show notes of some of the places that I look. Amazon does a best books of the month post every month. Their editor picks, and then they have them broken down by ages. It's like 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, I think, and then like 9 to 12. And so that's, you know, usually 4 or 5 books for each of those. And, you know, sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. That's a good one. I also really like Amazon Recommends.
Okay.
You know, so if you find a book that you like and it says other people have also bought these books, I find that really useful. Hornbook, I like. Trying to think what some of the other ones, you know, a lot of libraries put together excellent lists. I like state book lists. Texas does a lot of them, like the Bluebonnet list or the 2x2 list, which is books for 2-year-olds through 2nd grade, picture books. And so cool. I have several state lists that I kind of follow along with. Junior Library Guild I really like, and they break down into lots of different categories, you know, very specific kinds of categories like Spanish picture books for K through 2nd, or graphic novels for middle grade and junior high kids, or, you know, there's just a lot of good research out there. I also just read a ton of picture books. So there's lots of ones that never make it off the cutting room floor.
So along that vein, I feel like you are also always really on top of amazing book deals, and you're so good about informing us about them. Various, you know, websites and things. There's always Amazon deals, I feel like, that you put through on the week. But what would you recommend to moms who are trying to build up their home library without breaking the bank? And I do book subscription boxes too. I've done a few. But if that's not an option, where do you like to go for decent but discounted books?
So I think the best deals that you're ever going to get are either library book sales or thrift stores. I think thrift stores are especially good for a little like less picture books and more like chapter books. They tend to have tons, and they'll be like 25 cents or 50 cents a piece. Wow. Also, if you look up a little, I mean, this will not build your home library particularly, but little free libraries, if you're familiar with that. You can look up and see where one is around you, and, you know, go take some things out of there and put some of your own that you're done with in. So that's a really good one. I have not used this myself, but lots of people have told me that Facebook Marketplace is amazing. You know, as people are like, their kids are graduating and moving on, and they're kind of trying to clear out 25 years of board books, picture books, and chapter books that, you know, you can get. I've also heard great things about the Book Bundler, which is another one that I have not used. It's on my list to try and share about it if it's any good. But I've heard that it's really good. You can get, basically, from what I understand, they just send you a box of books at the level that you've asked for, and it's like 25. Like the books end up being about $1 a piece or less. Wow. Don't quote me on all this because I'm not an expert on that one, but I have heard really good things about that one.
No, that's great, and I think what you said was really key too, because I'd interviewed my mom earlier on this season, and she said all growing up, the very best deals she got on books, which her library now for her grandchildren is huge. She said was like the library book sales, because she worked in the PTA for a while, and she was helping do pennies for books and different things. And anyway, she said that was definitely generally where she got the best deals and good quality books.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And especially, a lot of times they just don't have room for, it's not that they're like no good and they're getting rid of it. It's like, this was a big bestseller and we had 20 copies and now we really only need 2 copies, or
Right.
whatever.
That's true. So kind of a fun question. Well, I think, what is your favorite genre to read with your girls? And it can be, I know you don't, do you read individually with each of them or do you try to read with 2 of them?
I read to my 3 oldest who are 5, 7, and 10 at night, all 3 together. And then I usually am reading a shorter chapter book aloud with my 5-year-old while the big girls are gone at school during the day. And sometimes with my 7-year-old, we read a chapter book together too. So, you always one going and sometimes 2 or 3. But I would say my favorite genre is realistic fiction. So, your like Beverly Cleary types of books, like they are fiction, but they are not magical. They could happen. Regular kids, regular families, and I that's what I particularly gravitate toward.
No, that's cool. I think that was, as a teacher, that was kind of the genre I brought in for our reading groups more often than not. Sometimes I liked a little fantasy in it, like Mysterious Benedict Society. So it was still, normal enough kids, but then with this plot and all these things they had to do. So, I mean, it had elements of kind of fantasy, but I really still feel like parts of it were realistic fiction. So that's really fun. I bet your girls love that. And it's probably just neat for them to get to read with you. And right now I read to both of my kids together during the day, but then my little one, since she still naps, I'll read to her at nap time and read to her at night. And then I go in and read with my son. I leave my husband to do it, but most of the time he's asleep. Even when it's a very interesting book, so then I'll go in and finish reading with him. And surprisingly, he did let me start a chapter book with him, but I got these easy chapters too that I feel like we're gonna breeze through because he seems a lot more engaged in that. And we did try Harry Potter, the illustrated version, and he liked it, but I feel like he wasn't dying to know what happened next. So I'm like, we'll try again in a little bit because it's very important to me that he loves Harry Potter.
Yeah, and I think Harry Potter is so interesting because it's like this cultural benchmark of like, my child read Harry Potter in 5th grade, all 7 books, or in kindergarten, all 7 books when they were 5. And I feel like
I've heard
Harry
that
Potter,
many times.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like such a like little bragging. I mean, it's like the, SAT scores of kindergarten,
Right.
And I feel like Harry Potter is a pretty dang complicated book. There are a lot of characters going on. There's a lot of like plot things going on that, if you didn't catch in the 1st or 2nd book, like a lot of things you're going to miss by the 3rd or 4th book. And, they get dark fast. And, so I read the first one aloud to my oldest when she was 6, I think. We were going with my parents to Harry Potter World. So I was like, oh, we probably should read it. And we read it and she liked it, but she's a very good reader, fantastic listener. And it was just too hard for her to follow along. We started the 2nd one. We read maybe like a chapter or 2. And I said, we don't have to keep reading this. Would you like to wait? And she was like, yeah, let's read something else instead. And then we came back like a year later. She was much more ready for it and, loved it. But, I feel like it's so easy to want to just push those books that you love and just are so anxious for them to read. And there's so many good books at every level. I just feel like let's enjoy every book at every stage, and we'll get to those older ones when they're, I feel that same way, frankly, in school, is that schools are pushing books that are just too advanced for a 9th grader to really appreciate or understand a lot of the time, and so then you have this bad taste in your mouth about a lot of the classics that if you went back and read older with a little more, capability, you would enjoy a lot more. And as a 14-year-old, you're kind of like, this is the stupidest book ever and I hate it.
Yeah, and I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's been a while since I was in high school, obviously, but I did all the AP English classes, and I remember either freshman or sophomore year reading A Heart of Darkness, and I was just like,
what is even going on here?
Yeah. But then again, so that's another one that I was like, okay, I'm going to revisit it as an adult. Again, completely different experience. And I feel like sometimes, certain books are really good for that point in your life. And you're right. I feel like some very advanced books get pushed at kids before they're ready for them. And let's just let them enjoy reading and get them like kind of enjoy the level they're at. You know, my husband's like the other day, we have so many board books, no more board books. I'm like, well, not for our toddler. If we have other babies, yes, because board books are just so awesome for various reasons for that, you know, 0 to 2 stage. But he was like, I remember when our son had turned 2, he was like, board books out of his room. Very like, we're big boy books now. And it's like, no, like he can still have these books. And thankfully as a teacher, I had a lot of my library still with me. A lot had been donated, a lot was my family's. But so I have all kinds of levels of books here at the house, but I just said, you know, let's see what he's interested in. And again, now he's doing space and outer space. I mean, some of the encyclopedias he wants to read or the way he talks about Mars would like astound somebody. But to me, it's just like, no, he's just so obsessed. He'll talk about Olympus Mons and go on. And you're like, wow, buddy, you love those books, you know, that's so good. It doesn't matter if they're like just kind of basic, because again, that's the level he's at. We'll go further. We'll, you know, scaffold as he goes. But that's one thing that's really important with reading is scaffolding, because our kids' listening level is of course higher than the reading like their own reading level, excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's cool. So that's why you can read chapter books with your, you know, your group of girls that are, I don't know, did you read Goose Girl with them? I know that was one of your book club books.
Let's see, my 2 oldest listened to it, and I would say my 7-year-old, she liked it. She didn't love it. It was a little old for her. I mean, she was listening to it on her own.
That's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she was listening to it with my older daughter. My 10-year-old loved it. So, you know, and it's just, you know, the right book at the right time. And, you know, sometimes it's not even an age thing. I think as an adult, sometimes you read a book that you're just like, I was just not in the right frame of mind or mood. You know, this was just not, or, you know, what I just read before this kind of ruined me for this sort of book. So, you know, it's all a timing thing.
Definitely. So for a second, we'll switch topics a little bit, still reading, but this time more about adult reading. So for those who don't already know this, Janssen has excellent book recommendations for adult women, runs her own book club. I'm behind on reading, so I'm going to have to save tomorrow's discussion that you're doing. I finally got it from my library, so I mean, I'm in it, but I was on the waiting list forever.
It's a very popular one.
Yeah, I noticed. What is your favorite book genre to read, Janssen, and maybe a favorite author or book?
So for the book club, really my favorite is nonfiction. I just think nonfiction lends itself to a discussion, at least for me, more easily than a fiction book. I can talk about a nonfiction book in a much more in-depth way, I think, than I'm good at talking about fiction. One of my favorite, I do love historical fiction also. One of my favorite books that we've done this year for the Everyday Reading Book Club, and frankly, just one of my favorite books I've read this year, was Lovely War by Julie Berry. Did you read that one?
Yes, I loved it.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. World War I book, you know, with kind of 4 main characters, and then also narrated by Greek gods, which sounds
so cool,
so bizarre.
It was cool. I loved it.
It was amazing. I mean, she just made it work so well, and I was just so floored by what a fantastic writer Julie Berry is. So I would say I'd never read one thing by her until this year. Now I've read a couple of her books, and she is an astounding writer. I am just blown away by how talented she is. I'm trying to think who else I really love. I mean, I love a good young adult teen romance. Just, you know, I might take away my serious reader card, but I am a diehard fan of To All the Boys I've Loved Before.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites. Yep. And I love Sarah Dessen, writes really fantastic, you know, contemporary teen, realistic fiction. I think is really well done. So I don't know. I feel like I read a wide variety of genres. I would say fantasy is not the genre I gravitate toward most. You know, here and there I'll read something that I just think is really fantastic. I really especially don't love adult fantasy a lot of the time. I feel like it's so complicated. I don't want that many maps at the beginning of my book. So, you know, that's my personal preference. That just doesn't really generally do it for me. But yeah, historical fiction, nonfiction, realistic fiction, some mystery. I don't know, a little of everything.
That's good though. You've got a wide range, and I'm pretty similar to you. I feel like nonfiction definitely gives a better discussion for book club. Mine this month is Atomic Habits, and that is such a good book.
Yes, that's a fantastic pick.
But then I am a huge historical fiction. Like that's my go-to genre. Even over romance, which is funny because as a teenager, I loved romance, and I still like young adult too, but I really love historical fiction. I'm currently working on a list of my favorites just to have handy to share with people because I love them.
Oh, that's so fun.
But I was going to ask you for fun too. Do you prefer reading on your Kindle or paperback? And I know that you do both. Do you prefer one over the other?
I would say I don't have a strong preference. I mean, I think generally if there's a paper copy easily available, that's what I would go to first. I'm a very heavy library user, so if my library has a copy, that's what I'm gonna gravitate toward. And for any book for the Everyday Reading Book Club, I buy myself a copy so that I can mark it up and reference it, which I feel like is harder to do on a Kindle. But I like to read on my Kindle too. It's very handy, easy to drop in my purse or take with me, or take on vacation. So I like them both. I have no strong preference.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I mean, but I'm so weird that if I go on vacation without a paperback, I will buy one in the airport.
Yeah, that's my mom too.
Very bad habit. But I have my Kindle, and the Kindle is super handy when you're on the airplane and your kids are sleeping on you, or you're in the car. Again, all those
one-handed, yeah,
traveling, yep.
And of course, all the newer ones all have backlights, so it can be dark, and it's fantastic.
It really is. So I'm kind of with you. I mean, I'm reading way too many books at the same time, but I'm all over.
Yep.
So this is a very different section of thought, but I remember this from a while ago. I mean, there's so many interesting things on your blog, which I will of course link in the show notes. I've posted on my blog. I just feel like you have super important and very relevant information for everybody, that not just reading, because you do lifestyle things too. I've loved some of your recipes, like the Thai soup or different things you've made, muffins. So it's just nice that you have all these things, like you're just well-rounded. I remember going back, I don't know, might have been a year ago, but there was a time when you got on Instagram and you were talking about, you may have posted and done a video about people who categorize boy books versus girl books and how that really bugged you. And I understand why. Could you share a bit of why that is a mindset limitation for people to think that way, and how you like to categorize or recommend books to people, or like kids lists?
So, I mean, it's tricky because I have 4 girls. So all the time people are sending me messages like, I know you only have girls, but could you recommend more books that are for boys? I know that this list is, because you have girls, which is really annoying, because usually on any of those lists, I will count and at least half of them will have male main leads. But, and it's tricky because no one looks at Harry Potter and says like, oh, I can't believe a girl is reading that book when it has a main boy character. Girls, it is not weird at all for girls to read books with a male main character, and it's just expected that like Harry Potter has universal appeal. But if it was whatever the female version of Harriet Potter, it'd be like only a book for girls, and I think that that's just too bad. I mean, you're just limiting yourself so much when there's so many fantastic books. And I think it's just such a disservice to boys in general for them to grow up with this idea that a story featuring a girl is not worth their time, or embarrassing, or not relevant to them. I mean, many of them are going to marry women, or have sisters, or have a mom, or have daughters, or work with women. And so to, say that those stories, because they feature a girl, are not relevant or useful or interesting to them, just, I think, sets them up for a bad, life experience that I wouldn't like at all. My brother-in-law, my husband's youngest brother, who's quite a bit younger, came over for dinner right at the same week that all of this was happening on Instagram when I was talking about it. And my husband said to his brother, what's your favorite book with a girl main character, and he said, "Oh, probably Anne of Green Gables." And my husband was like, "Well, what's your second favorite one?" He was like, "Oh, maybe Little House on the Prairie." I was like, "What about your third one?" He was like, "Little Women." Is there a point to all these questions? But I was just so glad that he wasn't like, "Oh, I have to think about this for a long time." I think my mother-in-law did a really great job with her kids. She has 3 boys and 3 girls, of reading books with boy main characters and girl main characters, and it wasn't a thing. It was just like, these are great stories, and some of them feature girls and some of them feature boys. And I would hope that parents would do the same for their kids. And of course, the ones that make me the most sad are when people send in messages saying that they have like a spouse or a in-law or a parent or a teacher or a librarian who's saying, "Oh, you wouldn't like that book, it's a girl book," or "Why are you reading that book with princesses?" And I'm just like, oh, that just makes me so sad. And I think there's lots of I get a lot of messages from parents who are like, "My son wants to read Babysitter's Club or Princess in Black or whatever books with female American characters, but they feel embarrassed about it because their teachers will make comments, or the librarian will make a comment, or their peers will make fun of them." And I just think that is such a sad cultural phenomenon that I hope that we can, as parents, push past and help our kids, boys and girls, feel like all stories are valuable and interesting. Just the same way that you don't say like, "Well, I don't want to read a book about World War II because I wasn't alive then." It's like, you can learn a lot of things and see different perspectives, and it's interesting even if it's not exactly the same as you. So anyway, I clearly have way too much to say about that topic.
No, and I asked you for a reason. I mean, I was intrigued by it, and as a school teacher, I remember I wasn't a big fan of graphic novels. I didn't feel like my boys that were good readers were picking good books when they'd always go for Captain Underpants, or I don't remember what the other one was, Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
But again, we need to like make sure that kids are enjoying what they're reading. And when I think back on it, Little Women is my favorite book. It's been my favorite since I was in 2nd grade. I grew up with, there's 4 girls and then 2 boys in my family, but we were always Little Women, the 4 of us. And various times we were different roles. So it's one that I reread annually, but anyway, that is not a girly book. I'm sorry. I know that it's called Little Women, but Teddy has a big role in it. Their dad is in the war. There's some war history in it. I know what you're saying, but I get so frustrated because I would be really sad if my son didn't want to read it just because of the title, or, I just feel like there's so much good literature, like you're saying, where even Goose Girl, like it may not be Harry Potter level, but like is it Bayern, that whole series?
Yeah. Books of Bayern.
That's a really engaging series, and I don't feel like it's overly romantic or overly girly.
No, I mean, high adventure, big time fantasy. I mean, it's so well written, so fun. And I think it's really sad that you're gonna have a lot of people who won't even pick it up because it's called The Goose Girl.
Yeah, we've got to rewrite that narrative. So you and I, maybe we can write a book together in the future or something. But and I even think about, I've been working on a children's book. And right now we're in the process of a few different companies wanting to publish it. But I remember when I first heard back, I wanted to take this video and tell everybody on Instagram how their daughters were going to love this book because the protagonist, Sophie, is a girl. And then I'm like, wait a minute. She plays soccer with the boys. She does these things with mixed groups of people. This is not a girl book. This is a book about, being yourself, being unique and confident in that. That's what the whole book's about. And I almost said the wrong thing about a book I'm writing. So
it's hard not to fall. Yes, it's very hard not to fall into that trap. Your second part of that question that I didn't answer was, how do I like to categorize books?
Mm-hmm.
So I get questions all the time with people who are like, "Can you recommend a book for my 6-year-old boy?" And I'm like, not unless I know more about what he's interested in. What one 6-year-old boy likes is not going to be the same as what another 6-year-old boy likes. Just the same thing. If you ask me for a book recommendation and you hate nonfiction, that's something I would like to know. Or if you're just like, I can't do any, Gretchen Rubin, who I love, she mentioned that she can't read any books with unjust accusations like that. Just, she can't deal with it, and like, those are helpful things to know when you're recommending books. And so, if I'm making a recommendation, I want to know, like, this is a kid who loves fantasy and some of their favorite books have been X, Y, and Z. That's going to be a lot more helpful than just the fact that it's a boy or a girl that's reading it.
And I think you had said, I don't know if it was Elephant and Piggy. It probably wasn't, but there was a series that you were trying to get people to comment on Instagram if they could come up with another series. But that's the thing. If it's based on a book or, you know, that their kid liked, that's way easier to give a book recommendation than my kid is 8 years old and plays soccer. And then you're like, okay, that's hardly anything to go off of. I'll find some soccer books, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I need more information. So that's very individualized, but that's cool. I'm glad you made that comment because, you know, and I know there's some book subscription boxes where they'll ask a survey or something about your kid, a questionnaire, and then they'll tailor the box to be like what they're interested in. We haven't done one of those, but I think that's neat because reader interest plays heavily into, you know, how much they'll read and what they're willing to read.
Absolutely.
Okay, one more question.
Okay.
You've been great. So you really always have awesome things going on your blog and on your website. And if you could share with our listeners a little more about the challenges, like the summer reading. We have a miniature version upstairs by the closet. The kids love helping color and put the stickers in. And I loved your Christmas one. So yeah, talk a little bit about the challenges and how you promote reading overall.
So the challenges have been something fun that, you know, I kind of had in mind for a couple of years, and it took me a while to kind of actually make it happen. So I am 0% artistic, but I worked with some really fantastic graphic designers and illustrators who have kind of brought my embarrassing sketches to life for these different ways to track your reading, or, you know, try different kinds of genres, or, you know, like the summer reading challenge will have, you know, like read a book with a blue cover, you know, that I try and have them pretty open so that you can find something that fits your interests, whatever level you're at, whatever kinds of genres you like. And for me, I feel like I just really want reading to be fun for my girls, to feel like reading is not a chore. Reading is something they look forward to and a really delightful, happy part of their childhood. And that's going to look different for every kid. What's motivating to them, what's interesting to them. And I think as a parent, you're in the perfect spot to know what is going to motivate my child. So my daughter, who struggled with reading, was not excited about practicing reading for a long time. But what she's even less excited about than practicing reading is going to bed. So if she could stay up late, you know, even like 10 or 15 minutes past when her other sisters were in bed to practice reading, practicing reading and staying up was more inviting than going to bed. And so that was very motivating to her. You know, other kids, it's going to, you know, be different things, whether it's the kinds of books that you read, when you read, where you read, who reads. You know, maybe it's like, you know, your mother-in-law or whatever, or an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor reads aloud to them over Zoom, or, you know, I mean, you'll know what is motivating. Some kids are going to love the novelty of reading on a Kindle versus a paper book. Some of them are going to find graphic novels just really works for the way their brains work. Others are going to like fantasy or humor. And I think whatever you can do to make reading a pleasant, positive experience for your kid is going to make the biggest difference, more than what books you're reading. You know, when people say like, what are your must-have books that every bookshelf should have? I'm like, I have none. There are no books that I think that every single person needs to own. Every family is different. Every kid is different. Everyone has different interests and, you know, values and what they, you know, care about. And there's books that I don't let that in our house that other people are just like, this was the book that made my child into a reader. And that's great. Like, what you get to pick what works for your family, and you're going to know what's going to work for your child more than anybody else.
That's very true. I feel like so, and I love your bookshelf. I've seen the transformation as you've been doing this office and everything. It's so cozy. I love the bookshelf. I feel like that aesthetic is just gorgeous. We're currently in a home where there's a bookshelf in my closet, but I don't think you can see it, but behind me, I've got just tons and tons of book boxes. So there's little baskets the kids can come. I used to have it really organized. Right now it's like there's board books and there's picture books, there's library books, because I got in trouble again today. They're like, we hope you brought some books back because you're at your limit. I'm like, yeah, I've got 20 books here in the front seat. We've loved the curbside service, and we, again, I've been going off your picture book list. I've been doing preschool lessons with my son, so I'll check out, 8 books for a theme or a unit theme. And then of course, any books I'm interested in, and then just books at large for both of them. My little girl loves cats and unicorns, so something along those lines. She's still so little, Oh, and Pinkalicious. Yeah, she loves Pinkalicious. And I still can't believe she can say it. But it's just, I really love everything you've said, because reading is a beautiful thing. It has made me happy. I want it to be something my kids look forward to, like you said. I want it to be an enjoyable part of their childhood and something that they look back on. And it's pretty ridiculous, but even when my son was brand new, as I would nurse him and rock him, I would read Prelude to Glory aloud to him, because I was just doing my historical fiction. And I felt silly, but then later I was like, no, it's important for them just to hear the sounds at any stage when they're that little. And then I feel like he's been a bookworm since his chubby hands could hold the book, the board books. So you've been a gem, and I'm so thankful you came on today. I feel like there's so many good things that people are going to learn, and we may have heightened interest in savvy readers. You never know. You might get more applications. You might just be so busy with that. But I'm really thrilled that it's doing that well, because it's a program that will be really effective. I feel like, especially with coronavirus throwing everything off, making some people virtual, digital school right now, some people in person, hybrid. There's so many things going on. The kids need consistency, whatever it's going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and one more time, I remember you saying this, but it's kindergarten through second grade level, but it might be older kids that are just reading on that level.
Yes, exactly.
That's beautiful. I love it. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Not that I can think of. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I think you're doing great work.
Thank you. Well, I've got a long way to go, but I at least have some great people to look up to. So thank you. And thanks for being here. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.